Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here, for choosing to show up for yourself tonight. I want you to listen close because what I'm about to say is simple but powerful. If you want a different life, sometimes you have to disappear from the version of yourself that's comfortable, loud, and stuck. And you have to reappear as somebody wiser, stronger, and unapologetically yo. Stepping back from external noise and people-pleasing is one of the most courageous acts a person can commit to. For so many of us, life becomes a constant performance, a stage where we wear masks just to fit in, to keep others happy, or to avoid conflict. We adjust our tones so no one feels offended. We shrink our dreams so no one feels threatened, and we silence our truth so no one labels us difficult. But the truth is, this constant bending and twisting of who we really are creates an internal prison. Every time you suppress your voice, you give away a piece of your freedom. Every time you compromise on your dreams for the sake of someone else's approval, you are dimming your own light. To disappear and transform yourself, the first step is not about changing how you look or reinventing your career. It starts by intentionally stepping back from the noise that has been shaping your decisions and keeping you chained to roles you no longer want to play. The world is loud and everybody has an opinion. Social media shouts at you with comparisons. Strangers tell you who you should be. Family sometimes pressures you with traditions, and even friends unknowingly weigh you down with their expectations. If you're not careful, you end up living a script that was written by everyone else but you. The problem with this is that it may earn you applause for a while, but deep down, you know the applause is not for the real you, it's for the performer. That gap between who you truly are and who you pretend to be grows wider. And eventually you wake up feeling exhausted and disconnected from yourself. That exhaustion is the sign that it's time to disappear. Not in the sense of running away from life, but in the sense of retreating from the noise so you can hear your own voice again. When you take that step back, you begin to reclaim space for your growth. Growth doesn't happen in the spotlight or constant validation. It happens in quiet moments of honesty. When you remove yourself from the cycle of pleasing people, you start asking harder questions. What do I actually want? What values are truly mine? What kind of life do I envision when no one else is looking? These questions are uncomfortable because they strip away the excuses that come from living through others. But they are necessary because transformation requires you to build on your truth, not on borrowed expectation. Of course, stepping back has its cost. People who are used to your constant availability, your endless yes, and your willingness to sacrifice yourself for their comfort will not always welcome the change. Some will accuse you of being selfish. Others will say you change in a negative way. This resistance is a test. It's the world checking if you are serious about your new direction. If you fold under that pressure, you fall back into the same cycle. But if you stand firm and protect the space you've created, you'll realize something powerful. The people who truly love and respect you will adjust. And those who only value you for your compliance were never invested in your growth to begin with. Once you cut out the noise, your vision starts to clear. Think of it like cleaning a foggy window. Suddenly, you see possibilities that were invisible before. You realize how much energy was wasted trying to control what people think. Energy that can now be redirected toward your goals. You learn to hear the sound of your own intuition again. And that sound becomes your compass. Transformation becomes possible, not because you added something new, but because you finally had the courage to subtract the distraction. Stepping back is not weakness, it's strength. It's not abandonment, it's alignment. By saying no to the endless noise and refusing to people please, you give yourself the chance to grow into the person you were always meant to be. You create space for your authenticity, and in that authenticity, transformation takes root. The seed of your new self cannot grow in soil crowded with weeds of other people's expectations. You must clear the ground, and that clearing begins with stepping back. Owning your truth is one of the hardest but most liberating steps in transformation. It requires courage to look at yourself in the mirror without filters, without excuses, and without trying to dress up the flaws. Most people spend their entire lives running from that kind of honesty because it feels heavy, it feels painful, and it makes us face the parts of ourselves we rather bury. But if you don't confront it, you will keep living in cycles of denial and frustration, never breaking free from the patterns that hold you back. Admitting your failures and excuses is not about self-punishment. It is about building a foundation on reality. You can't transform if you're building on illusions, because illusions crumble the moment pressure comes. Real growth can only come from truth. When you admit your failures, you take away their power to haunt you. Failure is not a permanent stamp on your life, but pretending it never happened traps you in shame. By naming it, you strip it of its control, saying, yes, I failed in that relationship because I wasn't honest, or I failed in that business because I was lazy, or I failed in that opportunity because I let fear win, doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger, because now you have the clarity to change the behavior. It is like shining a flashlight in a dark room. Suddenly, the monsters in the corner are as scary as you thought. Failure becomes a teacher instead of a prison guard. Excuses are even more dangerous than failures because they are lies we tell ourselves to feel safe. Excuses are clever, they sound reasonable, and they let you avoid responsibility. I don't have time. I wasn't given the same opportunities. I'll start when the conditions are better. These statements sound true, but deep down they are shields that protect your comfort zone. The problem with excuses is that they feel comfortable in the moment, but they rob you of progress in the long run. Owning your truth means taking off those shields and admitting when you have been hiding behind them. Saying, I didn't try because I was scared is painful, but it is real, and in that reality, you can finally do something about it. Transformation starts at the point where honesty and responsibility meet. When you stop blaming other people or external situations for everything wrong in your life, you regain your power. If the problem is always outside you, you will always be powerless to change it. But if you admit that your choices, your habits, and your mindset contributed to where you are, suddenly you realize you also hold the key to changing your future. This isn't about blaming yourself for everything. It's about owning your part so you can rewrite it. This kind of truth-telling requires humility. It means saying, I thought I knew more than I did, or I hurt people because I was selfish, or I wasted time when I should have been working. Humility doesn't diminish you, it elevates you because it shows you're willing to grow. People respect honesty far more than perfection. Nobody truly relates to someone who acts flawless, but everybody respects the person who can admit mistakes and then stand up again. Once you start living in that honesty, a weight lifts. You don't have to keep up the exhausting act of pretending you're something you're not. You don't have to defend weak excuses anymore. You don't have to run from the memory of your failures. Instead, you use them as tools to build a new version of yourself. Admitting failure gives you lessons. Admitting excuses gives you freedom. Together, they give you the blueprint for transformation. This is why owning your truth is essential. Without it, transformation is just a costume. You might look different on the outside, but you're the same underneath. With it, change becomes real and lasting. You stop fearing your past, you stop hiding behind excuses, and you step into a future built on strength, honesty, and responsibility. And when you live like that, nobody, not even your old self, can hold you back. Discipline is the quiet engine behind every transformation. People often think change happens through one big dramatic decision, but in reality, it is the daily choices, The small steps that add up over time that shape who you become. Discipline is the ability to do what you said you would do long after the excitement of making that decision has faded. It is waking up early when your body wants to stay in bed. It is saying no to distractions that promise comfort but steal progress. And it is committing to a routine that aligns with your future self even when nobody is watching. Discipline is not glamorous. It does not give you instant applause. What it does give you is a steady foundation that makes transformation possible. Most people underestimate how much power there is in small, consistent actions. They want the big leap, the overnight success, the visible transformation that everyone can notice and praise. But the truth is that real transformation hides in repetition. Reading a few pages of a book every day doesn't feel like much, but over a year, it can change your perspective entirely. Saving a small amount of money weekly doesn't seem like much, but over time, it creates financial stability. Exercising for 20 minutes a day may feel insignificant, but over months, it reshapes your body and health. Transformation is not a single event. It is the compound interest of discipline. Discipline also builds trust with yourself. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your self-respect. And every time you break that promise, you weaken it. People think discipline is about forcing yourself through misery, but in truth, it is about building a relationship with yourself where your word matters. When you say, I will do this, and then you actually do it, you create proof that you can rely on yourself. The inner trust is priceless because transformation is a long journey, and there will be moments when doubt, fear, and fatigue try to knock you down. If you have trained yourself to be disciplined, you will push through those moments because you know your word to yourself is unbreakable. Another important part of discipline is the ability to say no. The world is full of distractions, social media, endless entertainment, gossip, procrastination, all designed to eat your time and drain your focus. Without discipline, it is easy to fall into these traps and convince yourself that you will get serious later. But later often never comes. Discipline forces you to protect your time and treat it like the most valuable currency you have. When you learn to say no to the things that do not serve your growth, you create space for the habits and practices that do. Transformation is less about adding more and more to your plate and more about removing the unnecessary until only the essential remains. Discipline also demands patience. In a culture obsessed with instant gratification, discipline teaches you to play the long game. You may not see results after a week or even a month, but if you stay consistent, the results will come. The person who gives up because progress feels slow never sees the breakthrough that was just around the corner. Transformation is slow, but discipline keeps you moving even when your emotions beg you to stop. Over time, discipline becomes identity. At first, it feels like effort. You push yourself, you resist temptation, you fight old habits. But as you stay consistent, those actions become automatic. You no longer have to think hard about whether to work on your goals because it becomes who you are. And that is the essence of transformation, becoming a person whose daily habits naturally align with the life they desire. This is why discipline is not just a tool. It is the backbone of lasting change. Without it, transformation is only a dream that fades with time. With it, transformation becomes inevitable because day by day, step by step, you are carving out the future you once thought was impossible. The people you surround yourself with play a direct role in shaping the person you become. No matter how strong you believe you are, your environment has the power to either pull you forward or keep you chained to the same version of yourself you are trying to outgrow. Curating your circle and surrounding yourself with truth tellers is one of the most powerful decisions you can make when working toward transformation. You cannot expect to become a new person while staying immersed in the same conversations, the same negativity, and the same comfort zones that have held you back. Change requires not just an internal shift, but also an external one. And your circle is where that shift begins. Your circle should challenge you, not just cheer for you. There's nothing wrong with encouragement, but if the people around you only clap when you win and never tell you the hard truth when you slip, then you are not truly growing. Truth tellers are the ones who love you enough to risk your temporary anger in order to tell you what you need to hear. They see your blind spots, the weaknesses you try to cover up, and they bring them to your attention because they want to see you rise. That kind of honesty may sting in the moment, but it is priceless in the long run. Without it, you risk living in denial, thinking you are making progress while silently sabotaging yourself. Curating your circle also means being intentional about who gets access to your time and energy. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Some people are committed to drama, negativity, or mediocrity, and if you spend too much time with them, you will find yourself pulled into the same mindset. Energy is contagious, whether positive or negative. If your circle normalizes gossip, laziness, or excuses, you will eventually absorb those habits, no matter how determined you are. On the other hand, if your circle normalizes discipline, ambition, and accountability, you will naturally rise to meet that standard. Human beings adapt to their environment, which means your circle will either lift your ceiling or lower your potential. It is also important to understand that not everyone in your life can go with you to the next level. Some people are meant for a season, not a lifetime. When you begin to change, you might notice certain friendships start to feel heavy or outdated. It does not mean those people are bad. It simply means they are not aligned with the person you are becoming. Letting go of those connections can be painful, but holding on to them out of guilt or nostalgia can stall your growth. Transformation often requires pruning, removing the branches that no longer bear fruit so the tree can grow stronger. At the same time, you must actively seek out people who stretch you. Look for mentors, friends, or communities that inspire you to aim higher. If you are the smartest, most disciplined, or most ambitious person in the room, then you are in the wrong room. Growth happens when you are surrounded by people who push you beyond your limits, who expose you to new ideas, and who model the kind of life you aspire to live. These are the individuals who remind you that settling is not an option, who set a higher standard for what is possible. Truth tellers and growth-minded people also provide accountability. They do not let you drift off course without calling you back. They remind you of the promises you made to yourself, and they refuse to let you abandon your goals just because you are tired or discouraged. Having people who hold you accountable is like having guardrails on a highway. It keeps you from veering off track, even when the journey gets difficult. Choosing your circle wisely is not selfish, it is necessary. You are influenced by the people you spend the most time with, whether you realize it or not. If you want to transform, you must surround yourself with people who reflect the future you desire, not the past you are leaving behind. It is one of the most powerful ways to protect your growth and ensure your transformation is real and lasting. Failure is often misunderstood as the end of the road, when in reality it is one of the most valuable teachers life can give you. The truth is, nobody succeeds without falling, nobody grows without stumbling, and nobody transforms without first confronting setbacks that test their resolve. Embracing failure as learning means shifting your perspective from shame to growth. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You begin asking, what is this trying to teach me? That small shift in mindset is the difference between staying stuck in regret and moving forward with wisdom. When you accept that failure is not final, you release the fear that keeps you from taking risks, and transformation becomes possible because you are no longer paralyzed by the thought of imperfection. Every great achievement in history has been built on layers of failure. Athletes train for years and lose countless times before they break records. Entrepreneurs launch businesses that collapse before they build the one that thrives. Writers, artists, leaders. Every one of them has faced rejection, ridicule, and disappointment. What separates those who eventually succeed from those who quit is not luck, but persistence. Persistence is the bridge between failure and transformation. It is the decision to keep moving forward, even when you are bruised, tired, or unsure. It is refusing to let a single setback define your identity. Failure provides information that success cannot. When everything goes right, you celebrate, but you do not always analyze. When things fall apart, you are forced to reflect, to evaluate, and to uncover weaknesses that were hidden beneath comfort. Each failure carries a lesson about what works, what doesn't, and who you are under pressure. If you treat those lessons like gold, failure becomes less of an enemy and more of a guide pointing you toward the right direction. The people who fear failure the most often end up failing anyway, because fear stops them from trying. But those who see failure as part of the process eventually win, because they keep moving forward with new knowledge every time they fall. Persistence is what turns those lessons into momentum. Imagine pushing a heavy boulder uphill. At first, every step feels impossible and you are tempted to give up. But if you keep pushing, the boulder starts to move more easily and eventually momentum takes over. That is how persistence works. The beginning of any transformation is the hardest part because results are invisible and progress feels slow, but the ones who keep going, who refuse to quit even when it seems pointless, are the ones who eventually reach the breakthrough. Persistence multiplies effort into progress, and progress builds confidence, which in turn fuels more persistence. Another important truth about failure is that it builds resilience. Every time you fall and rise again, you develop a toughness that cannot be faked. Resilience is not built in comfort, it is forged in hardship. When you embrace failure, instead of running from it, you develop the ability to handle future challenges with more strength and calm. You realize that falling once does not mean you are incapable and that rejection does not define your worth. Resilience is what allows you to stand tall after storms that would have broken you in the past. People often think failure disqualifies them from success, but in reality, it qualifies them. The scars you carry are proof that you were willing to try. They are evidence that you fought for something. And those scars, instead of being a source of shame, can become your credentials for teaching others, for leading with authenticity, and for walking into the next stage of your life with wisdom that can only come from experience. Transformation without failure is impossible. You cannot grow without risk, and you cannot risk without sometimes falling. The goal is not to avoid failure, but to fail forward, to use every setback as a stepping stone instead of a stumbling block. When you see failure as learning and persistence as momentum, you stop fearing the journey. You understand that each setback is preparing you for the strength, clarity, and resilience you will need to handle the success waiting on the other side. Transformation becomes real the moment you start making promises to yourself and keeping them. These are not grand declarations you shout to the world, but quiet commitments you whisper to your soul and guard with discipline. Too often, people make promises to everyone else, family, friends, bosses, even strangers, and they work hard to keep them. But when it comes to themselves, they break their own word without hesitation. They say they will start tomorrow. They say they will commit when it feels easier. They say they will change when the timing is right. And each time they break that silent promise, They weaken the trust they have in themselves. True transformation requires rebuilding that trust by making small sacred promises and protecting them no matter what. A promise to yourself might seem insignificant at first. It could be waking up 30 minutes earlier to read, committing to walk daily, saving a small amount of money, or speaking kindly to yourself instead of tearing yourself down. These may look small on the outside, but they carry incredible weight because they represent integrity with yourself. When you keep these promises, you send a powerful message to your mind. I can count on me. That belief is the foundation of confidence. It is not the loud affirmations or the applause from others that builds real confidence. It is the quiet evidence you collect every day that shows you keep your word to yourself. The reason these promises must be small at first is because transformation is not about proving how much you can take on at once, but about building momentum. When you overwhelm yourself with massive promises you cannot realistically keep, you set yourself up for failure and disappointment. But when you choose small, doable commitments and honor them, you start stacking wins. Those wins become habits. Those habits become identity, and identity becomes destiny. A person who once doubted themselves begins to see proof of their own reliability, and that proof fuels bigger and bolder steps. Protecting these promises is just as important as making them. Life will always throw distractions, temptations, and setbacks your way. The moment you decide to commit to yourself, the world will test that commitment. You will feel tired. Other people will demand your time, and old habits will whisper for your attention. This is where you must draw the line and treat your promises like sacred contracts. You would not casually break a contract with a business partner or ignore a deadline at work, so why treat your own word with less respect? Protecting your promises means prioritizing them even when nobody else is holding you accountable. It means guarding your time, energy, and focus like treasure, because those promises are the key to unlocking the life you want. When you keep promises to yourself, you start rewriting your story. You stop seeing yourself as someone who talks big but never follows through. You stop carrying the guilt of abandoned resolutions and broken commitments. Instead, you carry pride, the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from knowing you are reliable. That shift changes how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you act, and even how others perceive you. People respect someone who respects themselves. Keeping promises is how you teach the world how to treat you. The beauty of this practice is that it compounds. A person who keeps one small promise today is more likely to keep another tomorrow. Over weeks and months, those promises add up. And the gap between who you were and who you are becoming grows wider. Before you know it, you are no longer the person who doubted, procrastinated, or settled for less. You are someone who moves with discipline, who honors commitments, and who embodies transformation, not as a dream, but as a lived reality. This is why making small sacred promises to yourself and protecting them is not just advice. It is the foundation of change. The promises are the bricks. The consistency is the mortar. And over time, you build a life so strong that nothing can shake it. Transformation is not about waiting for the perfect opportunity. It is about proving day by day that you can trust yourself to show up. And when you learn to trust yourself completely, there is no limit to who you can become.